Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio, where we provide world-class education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. I am Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and our show today is the Energy Show. Have you been watching this space? This is truly an incredible space to be a part of. We have someone who came to us as a referral from another friend, was a guest on this show, and now is hosting this show herself. I love when this happens. Her name is Kalimba Culverwell, and she is joining us from the United Kingdom. What do you need to know about this dynamic person? This dynamic person, Kalimba, is the author of the forthcoming Timeline Travelers channel. What is this? We're going to find out more about it. And she's also a design creative and a healer. We need help here on this planet as we transition from a 3D world into a 5D world. We're going to learn more all about this journey. Let's welcome Kalimba, who now is the host of the Energy Show once a month. Joining us, Kalimba, welcome. Hello.
Hi, Dr. Jacalyn. It's great to see you again. And it's a real honor and privilege again to be here. When you interviewed me last month, I didn't expect for this to happen. So thank you very much for sharing your platform with me again. And thank you for asking me to host this energy show.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I just love your energy. We got a lot of really good feedback from people who watched the show, and they said, this is something that I feel really resonated with me. I have family members who actually watched your interview as well, and they were touched by it. So whenever I hear that, I know we're on to something that is really life-changing. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the forthcoming Timeline Travelers channel.
Well, thank you. So Timeline Travelers channel is going to be a YouTube podcast that I'm just recording currently, which is really talking about timeline shifts that are taking place as we shift from one reality as a world to another one. And I guess our conversation, it really tied into energy, and that's why it fed so well that I should come and host this show with you.
Absolutely. I'd love to have you share a little bit about the word energy. And I know you talked about this in the first show that we did, but people get very confused when I talk about energy. You mean when I plug in the lights? What is energy, and how does it apply to this particular show, the Energy Show?
Energy means the life force that connects us all.
Excellent. I love that. That's easy to understand. Very good.
Great.
Thank you. So, Kalimba, we are going to continue our conversation from where we were before, and we were really talking about grief. And it's actually 2 months ago today that my mother passed away, and there's a lot of collective grief. There's a war going on. There are people who are really struggling even just to find the money to pay for food or to keep the lights on, per se. So when we think about collective grief, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, thank you, Dr. Jacalyn. I think, like you said earlier, we spoke last time about grief, and we spoke about grief on a more personal, micro level. For me, I wanted to, and because, like you said, there was a great response, it resonated with people. People reached out to me afterwards. I really wanted to kind of stay on that topic and expand it a little bit more and talk about it on the macro level. And so when I talk about collective grief, what I'm talking about is this grief that we experience as a group, as a nation, as a peoples, as a village, you name it.
Thank you. Kalimba, I was just reading an article today and it really kind of struck me. Some person, a gentleman, wrote in about the fact that everything is now through technology. You make a phone call and through artificial intelligence, you're going to get prompted to do this, that, and the other. You look at your phone and there's all kinds of apps. And he was just saying, what happened to the good old days? What happened when things seemed to be much simpler? And I wonder if that's also true with grief. Is it that grief now, when we look at the collective, we look at humanity, we look at the entire world culture, is grief more complicated than it was in the past?
Oh, wow. I can't imagine that it is any different. I think ultimately grief is about connection, and losing a loss or having a loss of that connection to either a people or a person, a place or a thing. And so I don't think it changed. I don't think technology or the world now necessarily changes how we experience or feel grief. We're still just as interconnected, if not more so nowadays. Perhaps we're more exposed to images of destruction, and that can add to our feeling of compound or cumulative grief, and be overwhelming and be burdening at times. But I don't imagine that it's changed so much between then and now. It's still a deeply personal experience.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. One thing I feel that is a positive is, instead of getting that pressure, oh, you need to get over this, or what's wrong with you, or she's been gone for however long, get your act together. There's more compassion. It seems like, it feels like, from certain people are more compassionate. I'm sure there are other people who are still out there, get over it and move on. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely, I definitely feel and hope so. I think there's been a lot of, there's been a lot more openness to discussion around mental health and emotional health. So yes, I think nowadays there's perhaps a space that we can mourn in, that we might not have been allowed in. Just to go back to your previous question, that we might not have really been allowed to explore in previous generations, particularly in the UK. And after the First and Second World Wars, my grandparents, people were taught to have a stiff upper lip or not to talk about things, and things were kept in the shadows. Why I really wanted to talk about collective grief at this point, even though I set the intention before we started this recording that it be timeless and for the highest good of all concerned. But why I think it's important to talk about it now is we are seeing a lot of chaos in the world. We're seeing wars between Israel and Palestine, and Russia and Ukraine and Sudan, and other conflicts that aren't garnering the media attention. They're still taking place around the world. We are currently between two lunar eclipses, where the world literally goes dark. It's right before the Day of the Dead is celebrated. And so I think there's a real energetic portal that's opening at the moment, where we can sort of speak about change, we can speak about compassion, we can have a nuanced discussion. And so if I take strength from anything, as much as this kind of growth in a more compassionate dialogue, what's been really comforting for me is that there's also been a much more nuanced dialogue, particularly taking place in discussion about the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And that's really encouraging. It's encouraging because words are no small thing. They really, truly, just as we all together have the power to create, words really have the ability to create. And so we can start with nuanced discussion. There's room for error, there's room for apology, there's room for diversity, and I think that means that we can start to pass out what must go. It means we can start to shape a discussion around positive change more freely.
This is a brilliant point that you bring up. And I think it also is in alignment with people being more open to listening as opposed to speaking. And especially we see with politicians when they have debates, at least here in this country, one talking over the other and somebody has to interject and say, hey, wait a minute. If we do that worldwide and say, hey, wait a minute, Kalimba, what do you have to say? Because I'm really interested. I want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I took your elevated listening course, which was a really great foundational course, actually, just discussing teaching exactly that. Let's use our 2 ears and 1 mouth in that ratio.
I'm glad that you brought that up. Thank you. I feel like we have a responsibility as humans, right? Because we're not robots. I know robots are here and they're here to stay, I imagine. But that's one of the things that makes us different is the ability for us to feel emotionally and for us to connect on a completely different level. And so when you think about the collective and you think about grief, imagine if there were a room full of robots and they were going to be somehow discussing grief. That might be a very different experience than if we were in a room with humans who are talking about it. What can you imagine would take place with the humans as that are not taking place with the robots?
Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad that you asked that question, actually, Dr. Jacalyn, because I've been thinking about that earlier. And I think it's so important. A lot of the grief that we go through, and it doesn't need to not just be, but it doesn't need to be a person passing. Grief can be the loss of a job, the loss of an opportunity to complete a life stage or celebrate a life stage or graduate, like so many people experienced during COVID. There was so much that has happened since COVID that has been cumulative and kind of compound in terms of collective grief. And arguably, we haven't really had a chance to mourn it publicly or together as a group. Arguably, that is the reason why people are fighting for repatriation and for history's wrongs to be made right. There's a lot of this disenfranchised grief that is now coming to the surface. It's so important to give ourselves a space to acknowledge the feelings that come up, to acknowledge our emotional and energetic bodies, and to honor that. And I think as a group, the way that we do that is to sit together and reminisce about things we've lost, or listen to one another, like you were saying as well, and have that connection, because with connection you have unity. We are all interconnected. There's no escaping that. If someone hurts, we all hurt. And seeing these sort of scenes on the media really sort of drives that home. You can feel guilty. You can feel like you're turning a blind eye if you try and limit your exposure to these things. But like I said before, we can't overburden ourselves with that. That's just not helpful. What we can do is collectively create space for nuanced discussion in these liminal spaces. That's where health can grow.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I do have a quick analogy of something that's going on right now, and then I'd love to have you speak on it. There's so much strife and conflict because we don't look the same. We don't feel the same. We have different perspectives. I'm watching iguanas outside and they look like dinosaurs. I used to be terrified of them. And I did a lot of research and I saw how fast they can run and how far they can fall and how they get up. And so now, even though I don't like them and I see them crawling around and I don't want them here, I respect the fact, because of coexistence and sustainability, they have a right to be here. This is their planet as well. And I feel like as human beings, if we were able to say, okay, maybe I don't like what this person stands for, or I don't appreciate the fact that they're on the trees or they're doing whatever it is they're doing, but they have a right to be here. Let me learn from them. let me learn from other people. Let me learn from the animals. Let me expand and grow based on taking the time to be curious and wonder. What do you think?
I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's so important to not invalidate anyone's experience or anyone's existence. And just to return to your point, the way we do validate that is by listening, is by creating space for nuanced discussion.
Absolutely. And Kalimba, I'd really love for you to talk a little bit, because I know people think, oh, what is this? It's some kind of magic, hocus pocus, about the fact that we as a people have an option, an opportunity to transition from a world that is about capitalism and it's about money and it's about, oh, me, to, oh, no, you, oh, us, all of us
Mm,
together. And
mm,
these experiences that we create, we're having an experience right now.
mm.
So how do we transition from what we hold on to so dearly, which are monetary things, the tangible, and let go a little bit of that so that we can embrace the intangible and the social global consciousness?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one of the hidden blessings or beauty behind grief is that it connects you to something that is beyond the material, that is beyond the physical. You know, people experience grief and suddenly their priorities or what they value in life transforms, it changes. Um, so grief's ability to speak to transformation, but also to connect us with our intuitive senses. You know, if you mention psychic or 5D consciousness, yes, do some people do shut down. It sort of sounds like hocus pocus, but there are subtle energies that exist in the world and in our lives. People discuss feeling things in their gut, and I think to really start moving from a 3D into this sort of 5D consciousness, the most important part of that is to not start discounting things as hocus pocus or crazy or women being a little too curious or nosy, however that sort of energy might have been described historically. What's more helpful is to start being open, just slightly open, to a higher sensory being, a sense of, a feeling about things that is beyond your five senses, that includes your intuition and your instincts.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up. I think also one word that seems to be governing people and their actions is the word fear. And
Mm,
people are afraid to think that something else might exist, or maybe that we were here before, or maybe
mm,
if you do express your feelings or you do show kindness to someone else, that can be perceived in various ways. So
mm,
when we think about grief, even, how do we
mm,
embrace fear so that it's
mm.
not something that we're pushing down and is in our stomach and is going to show up later as a health issue?
Mm. Yeah, I think everyone has a different journey, and everyone is making a different choice right now about what world or what reality they want to exist in. Whether they want to ascend to this 5D experience. And in order to do that, you have to release your fears and you have to release control. But if you don't choose to do that, that's absolutely fine as well. There is no shame or judgment in it. Fear is a really natural emotion, and radical self-acceptance, radical love, all of these things that do help you through your healing journey with grief are about accepting and acknowledging all of the fears that might come up, as much as you might any other emotional response or reaction to stuff. For sure, in this sort of current world, we are hot-wired, our nervous systems are hot-wired to use fear or anger. We're taught this. It's no surprise that we are all seeing the world in destruction and despair, because really this is something that's cultivated in schools, and it's something that perhaps serves us well in terms of survival, or even what we might have to do in our day-to-day at work. But if we start to begin to sort of acknowledge our bodies somatically and start getting quieter and more reflective about what we're experiencing, why we're experiencing the triggers, we can start stepping into a space that is less fearful, I think.
Great points. Thank you. I'm wondering, to help people out there who are going through grief, and again, it could be grief over any number of subjects. As someone who has experienced grief, I feel that my energy is much lower than it normally would be. And I just had COVID, I had a stomach virus before that. So all in a month, my body's crying out going, hey. So in order to do the healing journey and to be at a higher level of energy, is that possible when we're grieving, or is that the ultimate goal at the end of the grieving?
Yeah, that's a really good question. First of all, I'm really sorry to hear that you've been ill and you've been feeling low energy. My advice would be go with it. I think this idea that we should be high energy and operating at this level all the time, otherwise we're not going to attract this stuff, and that's disingenuous, inauthentic energy or power. The authentic power comes from feeling what we're feeling, acknowledging it, loving ourselves, approving of ourselves regardless of it, not giving ourselves a hard time. If you're feeling low energy, then your body is telling you to rest. If you're feeling ill, your body is telling you to rest, because in that rest, in that quiet, in that sort of quietening of our nervous systems, that's when the divine inspiration comes, if you're open to receiving it. And you might not be. But if you just open a little bit and start, and the way you do that, by the way, is kind of giving thanks, even giving thanks for feeling tired, even giving thanks for these lower sort of feelings or energies that you might be experiencing or going through. You might not understand it, but that's absolutely fine as well. We don't need to control everything. We don't need to have the answers to everything. But if we can be grateful for even that and accept it as part of our process and our journey, then that's going to be 100 times more compelling for us in terms of shifting onto higher energetic timelines, which it just might not be our time to do at that moment.
I really appreciate what you're saying, because that takes a lot of the pressure away. And many times we spend so much time questioning everything. I know people who are so analytical and they don't actually move forward with anything. They're questioning everything. Well, tell us a little bit about that. Why do you find yourself in a questioning space?
Listen, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to be analytical. I think it's great to be reflective and but I'm a worrywart. That's not a great thing to be. So I'm on that side of analytical. But that's not to say that I'm not conscious of it, or that we can't all be conscious of ourselves and in those states. Where I think it's unhelpful is that we are then letting our minds drive things, and it's really helpful to step away from your head space sometimes and allow other higher energies, or your higher soul self, your soul energy, your emotional energy, your body's energy, to communicate with you and to be a voice for you for a change, to shut down those voices in your head.
Thanks for your transparency on that. I appreciate it. I remember someone once said to me, keep your head where your feet are. And even though we may worry about things, wherever we are, we're not actually truly present, because here we're somewhere else, or maybe here we're somewhere else. So when you think about grief, do you think it actually is helpful if you are, like you and I are having this conversation right now? I'm here, you're here, but many times people are not really present, and therefore they can't actually do the work because they're avoiding doing the work because they're not actually present. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Listen, it's there's no right or wrong way to do it. Number one, it's really difficult to sit with pain and be present to that. It's incredibly difficult, and in this day and age, we're almost encouraged to focus on work or focus on other things that sort of activate our nervous system in a different way. But if you have the courage, bit by bit, if you got still and you started listening to your heart, and acknowledge that pain and sat with that pain, or even sat with, just to talk about collective grief again, if you sat and listened to someone and their pain, or you reminisced with them about their connection to someone or something and the loss of that, if you help them mark that loss or mark the life of that person, for example, that's a great way to start sort of being more accepting of things that, kind of like you were mentioning before, people see as being weak or vulnerable. Thankfully, less so than, if we were to go back to the beginning of our discussion, than historically maybe how it's been viewed. But it's a good practice to start acknowledging the self in all its multitudinous, beautiful ways, even its weak and vulnerable ways.
Thank you, Kalimba. I'd love for you to touch on something that I also think is extremely important, because when we are going through grief, let's say someone loses a job, a comment might be, oh, you hated that job anyway, or it's about time you got out of there, or a relationship breaks up. I never liked her. I never liked him. We don't actually provide the type of support to help that person grieve. Instead, what I feel is we're basically saying, listen, you're an idiot. Why were you staying in that job? Why were you staying in that relationship? You wasted time. You should have, instead of saying, I'm here for you. I don't know what you're going through, but I want to let you know that if you want someone to listen, I'm here for you.
That's what I loved about your course. There was this sort of great module in it which described sitting and not listening is not offering a solution all the time. We go through these things in life, and they are essentially things that create timeline shifts. They're not always negative things, although we might not realize that in the moment. They might be things that actually help us, and things that our soul has chosen to experience on Earth in this lifetime, that help us move to a different timeline trajectory that is arguably much more in support of our highest timeline version of ourselves. But while we are experiencing it in the 3D, in that moment, don't let anyone invalidate your feelings or what you're experiencing or your choices. You can be the only person who understands why you made those. And there is learning in all of that, sure. But people, might rush you onto the next phase sooner than you're ready. And I would say just push back against that, and find people who won't berate you and will listen, or won't try and find a solution.
Absolutely. Maybe you listen to your intuition instead of the pressure that you're getting from someone else. I think it would be interesting to have a chat about grief in the 3D. We can picture what that looks like, because that's where we are, versus grief in the 5D.
Oh, wow.
Wow. What would that look like possibly?
Wow. What would that look like? I think it would be a very realized thing. The whole point about 5D is that we are very intuitive, we're very interconnected, and we're more acknowledging of our wholeness, our oneness. And so I imagine that if we were experiencing grief in the 5D, it would be more like grief when you see a herd of elephants experiencing grief. I think it would be on a very honest, emotionally honest, true level.
It's something to look forward to and to embrace.
Yeah.
And Kalimba, we've talked about a number of
Lovely.
subjects today. What else would you like our audience to know about the subject of collective grief or anything under the umbrella of grief?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Jacalyn. I think, let me have a think. I think if, there's anything I can say just to kind of close, I think that there is great unity in shared bereavement if we are experiencing it at a collective level. And with unity, there's structure. And structure can be really helpful in terms of refocusing our energies and allowing us to recover from the shock of things, from the shared shock of things. What I would also like to offer, and this is only take it if it resonates for people. I hope it doesn't offend anyone when I say it, but there is an exercise you can do if you are feeling like you want to help. Obviously, there are very practical ways to help with scenes of sort of war or destruction or despair that you see around the world, and they might be donating money or donating time or being an activist. I think since this is the energy show and we're talking about energy, what we're able to do on an energetic soul level is, and this is a practice, is before bed to set the intention or to pray that your soul goes to where you would like to see healing happen, where you would like to see peace and joy happen, and that you would share your energy while you sleep, that you would share your higher soul's energy and to go to that place and send your soul literally like an angel to these places to help people who are going through and experiencing extreme trauma, hardship, death, etc. So like I say, that's just one practice. Praying is an excellent practice where you effectively set an intention to the higher mind to help with these things. And I'd stand by it. And I would encourage that, but only if it resonates for people.
Thank you for offering that up. I appreciate that greatly. But what can people expect from future episodes?
Well, I think it'd be great. Well, what they can expect in the next episode is we're going to talk about friendships, long-term friendships, and the breakdown of them, because 2023 really came for friendships. I've spoken to quite a few people now, and this seems to have been a dominant theme or motif of the year. So that people can definitely expect that in the next episode. But also we're going to talk about various different energetic principles or quasi or spiritual principles. So I think if people are listening to this episode and sort of maybe getting half of it or not really getting much of it, I would say stick with it, and please write to me, ask me any questions. We'll go through things and we'll expand on things, and I'll make them clearer so that we can bring everyone along.
Fantastic. Kalimba, while we have you on Spotlight, and we do have a contact designation for people, who would you like to reach out to you, and what's the value that you can provide to our audience?
Well, hopefully I can answer any questions that they may have. I can get into a nuanced discussion with them about anything that I've said here that might be triggering, or that might not resonate for them, or they might not understand. And they're welcome to contact me at Timeline Travelers, at Timeline_Travelers, sorry, for those discussions, or just to write comments in underneath this video. And so hopefully I can help people with just lending an ear and a perspective. That's all I can really offer. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but a safe space for sure. I can provide that for people.
Well, that is a true gift. So don't take that lightly. That is something that is very, very special.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. As we close out our show, any last words that you want to leave with our audience for people who are struggling with grief and they're just feeling, wow, I'm really enlightened by what I heard today. What is the next step for me?
Oh, wow. Just to say to anyone who is going through that, my heart is with you completely. I will be saying prayers for you. You are so special and you are so loved. And thank you for being here today. That's a huge, huge honor.
Thank you very much, Kalimba. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here with us
It's been
today.
a real pleasure, Dr. Jacalyn. Thank you so much again. And it's very kind of you to share your platform with me. And yeah, I can't encourage people enough to, listen to your courses as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, we're closing out for now, and we look forward to seeing everyone again next month.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.